You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of the best in contemporary a cappella. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Evan. And this week we have Sarah Mercedes on the show, and she's a Berklee student who's in Berklee's upper structure, and she's also in the Boston-based group Phoenix. She's an outstanding vocal perk, and she recently won Outstanding Vocal Perk at ICCA for her quarterfinal and semifinal with upper structure. During the show, we talked about how she got into vocal perk. We also talked a little bit about how she has adapted her technique for being in a smaller versus larger group. And then we also talked about emotive singing and how she tackles that.
The question about emotive singing was actually a listener question from one of our listeners. So if you have any questions for any of our upcoming guests, please feel free to message us on Facebook, DM us on Instagram or Twitter. Our guest next week is going to be Barbara DeVoe-Griffith from Vocal Rush. And so if you have any questions for her, please do shoot us a message on Facebook or Instagram. As I've mentioned, any references made during the episode will be found in the show notes, so if you're listening on SoundCloud, go ahead and hit show more. If you're on the podcast app, just go ahead and click the album art and it'll show you any links that we have to references made during the podcast. If you have a minute, it would help us out a ton if you could throw us a like on Facebook, follow us on SoundCloud, share with a friend that you think would enjoy the episode. And without any further ado, this week's episode of Head Voice. Bada boom.
Hey everyone, we're here at Sarah Mercedes and we're very excited to have her here.
Hi.
I'm going to turn it right over to you and just ask for you to just give us a little introduction on how you got into a cappella and where you sort of started.
Yeah. So I got into a cappella back in 2009 in Orlando when I started at the University of Central Florida. Hilariously enough, I had seen a couple of videos of Pitch Slapped on YouTube around that time and was very convinced that I needed to try to join an a cappella group at my school as soon as I could find one. So I ended up trying out for the female group that we had on campus. That same year, everyone seemed to have the same idea and they all tried out as well. And I ended up in a new girls group called Key Harmony, and kind of everything went downhill from there in the best way possible. That was that same year I got to go to SoJam for the first time, and Courtney Jensen was doing the general VP class at that time, and that she seemed so cool. Immediately when I saw her, I was like, I don't know who you are, but wherever you're going, I'm gonna have to check it out. So I kind of wound up sitting in that class, learning how to VP. Didn't actually VP for my group for 2 or 3 years until there was no one else that knew how to do it. And then I was kind of this is fun. I like this. So yeah. And from then on, it's just kind of been that kind of a story. Rehearsals, lots of a cappella. Moved here to Boston when I transferred to Berklee. Wasn't going to join an a cappella group because I was like, I already did this before back there. I should do something new. Hilariously enough, I kind of walked in by chance that night, and there wasn't that many groups or clubs showing what they had, and there was one lonely table in the middle, and that's where the girl was for the signups, and walked by and she's like, hey, so are you interested in a cappella? And I was like, I do, it's something I love so much, and I tried to say no, but I ended up signing up for being an alto 2/VP. Didn't even go to the auditions at all. I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And then I got an email from them a week after being like, hey, so even though you didn't come, we're having callbacks and we'd still like to meet you and everything like that. And that's kind of in the back of my mind, I was like, they didn't have another beatboxer come for sure. That's exactly what happened. They didn't do that. And then I kind of felt bad. I showed up late to the callbacks because I was still on the fence. I was like, I don't know. And it ended up being the best decision I've made since being here. It's just been a lot of fun. So that's how I got into that.
So just to go along with that, we did have a question for you from one of our listeners. So okay. Nora Solzman asked, first she said in all caps, Sarah Mercedes, how are you so fabulous? And then she said, no, but really, when did you start vocal perking? And was it a natural growth, or did you really have to challenge yourself to be on point as you are? I love her in parentheses. So, that makes me so happy. I love her too. And
I'm not sure when I got so fabulous. I think that's something I'm still working on every day because I'm not fully convinced, but I'm glad that people are. And with Vocal Perk, yeah, I started at that general VP class in 2009. With doing that, and I kind of sounded like a deflating balloon. I even was like so excited about it that I was like recording guitar and GarageBand and like vocals, and I think I did The Only Exception by Paramore, and I was like, ooh, I know, yeah. I was like, I know how to do drum sounds now, and I was like, I'm gonna add some, and I ended up sending it to my friend, and she like, I'll never forget, she sent me like, she responded, and she was like, hey, so like this sounds really nice and all, but like what are those little like air sounds in the background, like what is that? You kind of sound like just there's like a balloon or something. And I was like, oh, I was trying to do like, that's supposed to be a snare, and like, you know, there's supposed to be a drum kick and stuff. And she was like, yeah, no, you should take that out. And so like that's kind of where I started, and I was like, oh, I'm never doing this again. And then it just kind of became like a little bit of a habit that I do like on my own, and like beatboxing along in the car, like doing it in just in the shower, like anywhere. And it just kind of progressed from there. Just, I don't know. Let's see. What else? Dang.
Are there any like big influences that you had in terms of like people that you tried to emulate, or whether it's beatboxers or percussionists?
For the longest time, it was Courtney Jensen. She like, I think she did that like how to DVD like a while back, and I got it, and I was like, I'm gonna be her. And she had like these really cool videos where she would like do these like lip buzzing things and also sing like the Darth Vader theme over it. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool, I'm gonna do it. And then after that, I kind of was seeing a lot of people just do different things, and I can't say that I was specifically influenced by any one vocal perk or one beatboxer up until like very recently, because it was just sort of taking inspiration, and like I'd see like a bunch of dudes doing some things, and it'd be like, oh, I like that, like maybe I can try doing that. And like what's her name, Beatrice from the Boxettes way back in the day,
Bellatrix,
that's what it is. Bellatrix, she does a really gnarly lip buzz. It is the coolest thing in the world. And at another SoJam, I actually got to see the Boxettes do that. And there was this one part where she did it into the microphone, and like the entire floor of the theater just shook, like everything shook. And I was like, that is a female doing that, and she's not using her voice. I don't know how she's doing it, but I'm gonna figure it out. And just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, that's kind of those have been the two biggest influences. Recently I got to meet someone who was a huge influence in Voice Asia or Vocal Play Asia, something like that. And he's an incredible vocal percussionist, to the point where like he is the drum set for like live bands with guitars and like instruments and all that stuff. And then recently I met a beatboxer named Shinozaki. And he is beast. Like he does some of the coolest things. Like he sings over what he's doing, and like it's a mixture of electronic-y and also like percussion based. So that's really cool.
Yeah, Deke Sharon just posted that loft session that he did with that original that he did, and it's like
yeah. He's crazy, just in the best way possible. Yeah.
So I was kind of curious, because you do have a background in singing, since that's primarily what you started doing in acapella. So I'm just curious if you have experimented with vocals and percussion, and if that's something that you try to pursue.
Yeah. I'm right now trying to like work my way into like getting a loop machine and trying to like do that thing. But recently I started trying to practice like singing over doing the percussion. So there's a song by Music Soul Child that the beginning of the song is him doing it, and it's basically like boom, 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 and then like he kind of goes from there, and like I've been practicing that. It could be a lot cleaner, but that's kind of like where I'm at with that. For a long time I just decided that I wanted to be really good. Like I couldn't like put the two together, because like in my brain I'm like, you have to be really good at both of them before you can try it, and like that's not necessarily the case always. So it's just been recently that I've been trying to like hum and do little things in terms of singing over it. I also don't really like mixing using my voice and perking at the same time, because I find that certain things that you do, like growls and like sounds, can actually aggravate your vocal cords. And like I'd rather stay on like the more vocally healthy side of things, so that I don't ruin any type of thing for singing.
So you're also a member of semi-pro group Phoenix here in Boston.
Yes.
And so you've kind of, had the experience of doing the all-female thing, both at UCF and with Phoenix. And then you have, and so Phoenix is obviously kind of a smaller group, so semi-pro. And then you have upper structure, which is like almost a chorus in terms of like how big it is.
I think it technically is a chorus at this point,
How
actually.
many members do you guys have?
We have 17 right now. We just lost a few members from graduation and stuff, so we've gone down to maybe 16. No, I'm just joking. I think now we have like 14 or 15 people, but it's still a large group of people.
Yeah.
Phoenix had 8. And that's, I think, the smallest setting I've been in for a cappella.
Yeah. So like, how do you find it is like navigating like artistically how to fit into like both of those different settings? What's the same, what's different?
That's a fun question. I think ultimately what ends up being the same is that you have to provide a foundation of some sort. You know, you have to, or at least like I find myself wanting to be very consistent in like whatever tempo I am. What's different are the vibes. Phoenix and Upper Structure both sort of offer like completely different vibes in terms of the human beings that are in the group and also in terms of the music that we want to create. So Phoenix, we tend to go a little bit more on like the sultry, like a little bit more of like pop, like female empowerment, like this is us, like we're going to be in your face, badass women type of deal. And Upper Structure has like the upper structure-y, like edgier, I guess. I feel like every a cappella group says they're edgy in some way, so I don't really want to say that, but you know, we have our own we have our own vibe there, and it's kind of for me it really just depends a lot on the energy of the room and the energy of the people that I'm performing with and working with. So Phoenix, it's nice in Phoenix in the sense that I don't get a lot of like drum tracks in the demos that we get, and that's actually a lie. Hold on. That's actually a huge lie. Totally get drum tracks. Hannah did one of them, and like the drum track that she gave us for High Heels was so cool. So let's see, how do I find the energy? Yeah, it's really just on the energy of the people in the room. And depending on the songs that we listen to, I kind of don't necessarily like laying down any percussion before the group has figured out like what their vibe in that song itself is. It makes it a little bit harder. So for like Phoenix, we did a mashup of Words by Daya and Say It by Flume. And that was a lot of fun because like it was arranged by Johnny Del Toro, and he brings like a whole new perspective on it in a sense. So it starts off a lot slower, but then we still wanted that electronic-y feel from the original of Say It. But then also in performing it, like everyone kind of brought this really like grounded forward, but still very seductive sort of a vibe to it. And that's kind of where I got like my perk from. I was like, oh, I can incorporate this from the original. And like there's a lot of like build-ups because we wanted that electronic-y feel of like, oh, you build up to that climatic point and then you drop it. And then in Upper Structure, they let me do my thing. Honestly, at the end of the day, both groups let me really do my thing, and that's like the most enjoyable part. But like Upper Structure really lets me do my thing. A lot of it is because for a long time there are so many people in the group, and like you have to like pay attention to every part. And like the more self-sufficient I could be, like the easier it kind of makes it on everyone else. And yeah, it really is energy and vibe in there. And that one gets a little bit difficult because there are so many people and like there's so many different ideas of how we want the song to sound. But that's pretty much it. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, yeah, totally.
So something interesting that I thought you said was that Hannah had put in a drum line in one of the songs that you had done. So I'm just curious to know like, do you find that method better, or like what advantages do you find to that sort of method where you hear a preset drumming line that's already in it versus like you having to start from scratch and make your own thing?
There's interestingly enough, I don't ever feel like I'm necessarily starting from scratch because I'm kind of always gathering inspiration from somewhere. So for I Miss You, the inspiration came from the actual original track itself and the percussion part that comes there. And then with like Hannah's, like, yeah, she gets the drum part. I like both in a sense. I get a lot of anxiety about like what I'm gonna like do and like what I'm laying down, and like, is this
so many options?
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is this the groove that they want? I'm like, is this too cliche? Like, are we really gonna do another halftime break here? You know, like that kind of a thing. So when someone gives me something that they're like, oh, like I kind of like this, like, and this is what I want you to do, like I'm like, all right, cool, like this is where everyone's kind of agreed on, and then I sort of tweak it a little bit there, because I never get it quite perfectly right. As much as I try, like I never get quite perfectly right, and I like insert my way into there somewhere. And a lot of times I've also gotten like they'll write out the part, and like I get to like read the drum hits, which is also fun in a way. It kind of is cool because it's always suggested, and that's always what everyone's very adamant about, which is really awesome, and kind of inspiring in a way, because you're like, wow, you really are giving me all of this like free reign to do whatever I want, which is like, while it is anxiety producing for me, it's also like really cool because it's like, all right, you trust me, and like you believe in whatever I'm gonna throw out there. So I'm kind of comfortable in both. There is a certain level of fun in just kind of imitating whatever the drum track is, in a sense, because regardless of what I do, it's still going to be individually me. Right. Like I never feel like I'm quite like ripping it off completely. So Upper Structure does, we do She by Zayn. And in the initial demo track, like I initially didn't know like how we were going to do it, like, or what the arrangement was going to be like, or anything like that. And Elliot sent us like the demo reel, and he had put an apple loop as the drum part, and that's kind of, and literally what it sounded like was the right. So like that's kind of where I got that, and I was like listening to it, and I was like, oh, okay, so like that's just that over and over again, and I could do right, but it didn't feel the same, and I was like, I want that sound. And so like getting ideas from that's kind of where I have the most fun, is just kind of like listening to it and being like, ooh, how can I imitate it?
That's awesome.
Are there any, like, when you're going about constructing a part, obviously you're pulling a lot from the song and then your own inspirations. Are there any, like, do you have any go-to moves that you do in terms of like fills, or like if you're just looking to fill a space? Because at least for me personally, when I was perking back in the day, it was like, there would be the thing that I would kind of turn to as like, at least as a foundational point of like, this is going to be the fill here. This is like, this is the basic beat I'm going to lay here. Like what are the Sarah Mercedes like moves that you like have in the toolbox?
Ooh. Okay, that's a good question. I think everyone does have those. I'm personally, it's just certain things that I know that like I'm good at and I can whip out at any moment. So there's that very like sort of classic Latin based beat, the right. So that makes it like they want something like a little different. I'm like, hey. Cultural. And then I really enjoy doing lip buzzes and like the drops, so the any kind of like that type of sound. That I got to expand on that in doing Tears with Upper Structure, which was a lot of fun. There's the point where I get to like, I figured out how to go from like a higher sort of frequency pitch to like the lower one, so it would sound, I can maybe just try that type of deal. Whatever. So there's that, and what else? Other things. I think I've found that the beat sort of roots that I have come from the music that I've listened to and like grew up listening to. So a lot of like you can sort of rely on me to get like a very strong like bass kick. That's a very Sarah Mercedes type of deal. If it's anything that airs on the side of like hip hop-y sort of a beat, like I'm your girl. Like anytime anyone's like, oh, like freestyle or like VP paddle, I'm like, cool. Right? So like you can do, there's that. And I think anything in, what else? Another thing that I would probably like identify as like being very me is that like I try to sound like a drum kit or like a drum machine. And like you're not going to hear a lot of electronic-y stuff coming out of me because like I haven't explored that world all the way yet. And like what you will hear are like little things here and there, but it's not going to be that. So I think the most like Sarah Mercedes touch is just like that little aspect of reality where you kind of are like, oh wait, are you still a person? Like what's going on there? Because like that's what I've been imitating the most, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So Evan and I were fortunate enough to see Upper Structure's final concert, which was about a month or two ago.
Yeah, something like that. Time is relative.
So you guys were awesome, and One thing that one of our friends, Emma Soslowski, noticed was how emotive you were when you were perking. So she actually commented on our Instagram and was like, how do you do that? And I'm sure Evan can attest to this better than I, but I imagine it's probably pretty difficult to emote while you're perking.
Yes.
So if you have thoughts about that,
yeah, definitely.
please share.
I have so many, I think, or maybe not that many, unclear. To be honest with y'all, I just have a lot of feelings. I really do, and I feel a lot all the time. I'm a very sensitive human, and I think that like I feel so weird saying it, but I don't really know how to perk without emoting in a way, because it's just not fulfilling. It just kind of feels empty and like you're just passing the time away. So yeah, I think the best example for this is probably "I Miss You," the one that we do, the upper structure song. And sorry, best example of this is "I Miss You," the song that performed by upper structure, and it's I feel like I find it so much harder to like not throw myself into like what's happening and contributing to the energy that the group is putting out. It's so much harder to like be distant from that. And I kind of look at it the same way as I would look at playing any instrument or singing, and that like you feel something behind it. So specifically with "I Miss You," like that song makes me feel all different types of ways, both just like because of what the group itself is bringing and because the song reminds me of and like where that puts me in my head. And I think that like that's kind of why I use it as an outlet to like get a lot throatier like tom hits and get a lot more emotional like crashes, because like you're expressing something and like that's my way of like contributing like, you know, that high belt, or like that's my way of like making you feel what I'm feeling while we're performing the song. And I think that if people kind of thought about like vocal percussion the way that they do think about anything else, they would find themselves being able to emote, maybe like with a little bit more ease, because like if you don't think of it as like, oh, I'm just making sounds, it's like it's still coming from you, it's still very much a part of your person and like what you're contributing to the world. So like, you know, it's not just a sound, it's your sound. Like it's not just a crash hit, it's your crash hit. So like I don't know, I think kind of like bridging the gap between like, oh, it's just the vocal percussionist, like, oh, like, whatever, you're just doing, like, you're just spitting into the microphone. Like, even if you, like, take that, like, thought process out of your own mind, like, maybe you could find yourself being like, you know what, this song makes me feel really happy, and, like, I'm going to feel really happy when I hit this snare. Like, yeah, and maybe you'll find like, your snare sounds brighter. Or, like, maybe someone else will tell you, like, you know what, like, I'm really feeling that vocal perk, like something about the vibe they bring, because like it's super important. And like I don't know how many times like you've seen it, but I know that I've seen it. You see a group and they're performing their heart out, and then like you see the percussionist or the beatboxer, and they're just kind of standing there with like the mic, and like whether like, you know, that's their own deal. Like I'm not judging or anything like that, but it's just kind of like it's such a missed opportunity almost, because like why are you performing at that point? Like why are you doing that? Like what's the point there? And like to each their own, but I just find it makes a lot more fun, like so much more fun to just, that's your solo, you know, like people are going to hear you, people are going to like recognize what you're doing. And so like, why not make it the most you that you can? Yeah.
Right. So. Like to speak, I think, well, I would say definitely at points in my perking career, that's definitely been me, whether it's like conscious or not, like your face just ends up looking whatever, because, I'm not going to speak for other people, only for myself, but I just know sometimes it's easy to be like, because perking is such like a technical thing that I feel like doesn't come as naturally to a human being as like singing a melody is, like it's easy to get caught up in just physically producing the thing and like not running out of air, like all these things like technically that are running through your mind. So for you, is there anything that in terms of like how you prepare or how you practice that like leads up to being able to, you know, in the moment be able to give that emotive performance and kind of get out of your head of, you know, I have to make this kick sound as tight as possible or whatever?
Ooh, good question. That's so true. I think that like that definitely happens with percussion. That happens with anything really, is you get lost in the technicality of it and you're like, wow, producing sound. I've had to have a lot of talks with myself, really, to be completely honest with you. And that, you know, I've found that I tend to overthink things. And the moment that I do overthink something and I'm like, I'm going to make this the tightest kick I've ever had, it is the worst sounding thing that's ever come out of my mouth. So a lot of it is just self-talk and being just like, trust yourself. Or like, I know something that Upper Structure has done that has always helped me is that we like would do circle sings, or we would like turn the lights off and like no one's looking at you and like no one's like, you can tell that everyone's just sort of in their own world. And sort of reminding myself that like we're all doing our own thing here and like what matters is like the contribution and not the little part behind it. That's always, I found that to be super helpful. Or like I'll remind myself of a situation to like really kind of like open up whatever I'm feeling and like put myself in that moment, being like, I have no option but to like think this really intense thought or like think this really happy thing, and like instead of that. Before our ICCA performances, I was freaking out because I was like, oh wow, okay, like this is a lot. I can do this, but this is a lot. And I was like, there's, you know, like so many more other like people here that are doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. They're offering the same amount of like everything. And, you know, I was like, what am I going to bring here that's different? And I was like, I can't think about that, you know, type of deal. So I kind of like got him and I was like, you're a monster. I was like, for 12 minutes, you're a monster. You're just like a drum monster. You feel whatever you have to feel and then do it and don't think about it. I was like, you're that for 12 minutes, Sarah. That's all you have to maintain this thought process for. And like behind, I was like, I'm a beast. I'm a beast. I am a beast. Like, it's just like little things like that you have to kind of like, you talk to yourself as if you were your friend, you know, the same way that you would like maybe try to inspire someone else, like going on stage being like, hey, you know, you got this. Like you do that and being like, don't worry about the crash, because at the end of the day, you're the only person who knows what it's going to sound like or what you want it to sound like. So like, regardless of like what I'm thinking, if I go, you still heard, right? Yeah. So like I could sit here and be like, oh, like my tongue was going this way and there was like that much air in my mouth and but like that doesn't really change anything outside of that. So.
And then just shout out to you because you did win Outstanding Vocal Perk for your quarterfinal and semifinal.
Thank you.
I think your mantra worked. I am a beast mantra.
Actually, I should credit that to AJ because she was like, Sarah, you just need to forget everything, and she kind of like pepped me up a little bit, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. Also, shout out to Kellyanne for quarterfinals because I'm glad that we both won it. I was so excited when they said her name because immediately I was like, female VP, yes. And then they called my name. I was like, 2 female VPs. What? Female VPs. Yeah. So it was really cool. It was really exciting. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been really awesome talking to you. Typically at the end of our episodes, we like to ask what kind of trends you are excited by in acapella, like what in terms of what other groups are doing, what your group's doing, like what's getting you fired up these days, and also like what's next for you in terms of like your projects. What do you have in mind for Upper Structure and Phoenix and Sarah Mercedes herself? So yeah.
It's a long-winded question.
Yeah, I really made it.
That's okay. Let's see. Start from the beginning. I'm seeing a lot. It's funny because I feel like I probably have been saying this every year since I've been a part of acapella, but I feel like I'm seeing a lot more girls and a lot more females like step forward and want to be VP or vocal percussionist or get into beatboxing without really regards to being like, oh, I'm a girl and I'm doing this. It's just a lot of people being like, oh, I'm doing this. And then everyone else is like, you're a female and you're doing this. And they're like, yeah, but I'm doing this, you know? So that's a trend that I'm super excited about. There's so many like incredible female vocal percussion that's out there that have been out there and are also like starting to be out there. So like Julia from Track 9, Melinda, like that's how I feel about. I'm like, oh, she's so good. Kellyanne from Treble on Huntington, and like, you know, Courtney Jensen is always gonna be like someone that I've always like think of. But there's like all these sort of like females that like you meet and you get to like, and I've seen them like do their thing, and it's so inspiring because I know that other people are gonna see them do their thing, and like younger girls, like younger boys, whoever, like anyone is gonna see them do that and want to like do something like that or like better or whatever. A lot of trends. I think I'm really excited to see sort of the coming together of like vocal percussion and beatboxing, because I've seen like I think a lot of people are starting to sort of bridge that gap in a way. So like people like Jean and like people like Melinda, who does a lot of vocal perc, and she also does some really cool like electric sounds. Like I get really hype about it. Like I get very overwhelmed and I'm like, what do how? So like people are kind of like really bridging that gap, and it's not just like someone on the street doing right, and like you know, and people also aren't afraid to be doing that, and people aren't, so like Isaiah Carter on the Pitch Slapped album, like he destroyed all of that. It's so good. And like seeing him do it live is even better. And that's another thing that I'm really excited about trend-wise, is I'm seeing a lot of people, at least in the vocal perk world, want to stay true to their own sounds, regardless of production and mixing. And like you allow that to like make the recording so much better. But I'm noticing that people are also either like stepping themselves up, or like, you know, making sure that like what they put out is what they can do on stage. And like that's really cool, because the things that people are doing on stage are like mind blowing. Honestly, really though, Isaiah really just destroyed that album. The trap breakdown and like Beggin and Pleadin, and the way that they do it live, and it's still like that good. You're like, what? What? Yeah, and I'm also, I think on that note, I'm really excited to see that all of the groups that are sort of like putting things out right now are very adamant on like having their own group sort of sound and vibe. And like while you find similarities regardless of anything in like the acapella community, because of it's, you know, one community, I find that like people are like doing their own thing and it sounds similar, but it's with a twist, and you're like, that's very distinctly you, you know. And yeah, that's honestly like one of the coolest things that's going on. And I guess to segue off of that, Upper Structure is going to be releasing our album sometime in the fall. That like I just like heard one of our first mixes and I'm really excited about it, just because it's going to be really cool, the product that we put out. But that's kind of like where we're going in that sense. And I'm hoping that we're able to like build something that lasts, and you know, like something that people will want to like join and like be a part of, like regardless of what time period it is, you know, like when this whole thing might blow over, like they'll still want to be in it. So I'm excited for that. With Phoenix, I hope that we do some more recording. That would be really cool. I feel like Talking Body could be like a one-hit wonder, but maybe we could make it like a two-hit wonder, unclear. And for Sarah Mercedes, let's see, what's she up to? I want to sing so much more than I am. And I think I'm at a point in my life where I kind of want to find a way to incorporate all of these really incredible tools that I've acquired throughout my lifetime and in my musical experience. So like with all of this vocal percussion, I feel like I've sort of reached a new tier with myself, and like I could really feel comfortable exploring other things. So like I was mentioning earlier, is like I wanted to get like a loop machine and like start like laying down my own tracks, because like now sort of like having been with acapella so long, you kind of figure out song forms as well, and like oh okay, so it's not just going to be like a basic 4-bar beat. I could do like sections and switch it up and have fills and like have all these things, and then maybe like I've been playing cello my whole life, like bring that into the scene. I feel like right now I have so many tools and so many ideas that like Sarah Mercedes is just trying to build herself a nice house without it breaking down. Like, you know, I have all the ingredients there, but who knows if the cake will be nice. So
that's so awesome, and I wish you the best of luck. I hope that we get to see something that's like you perking and singing and playing cello. That'd be really
so
awesome.
Sick. Shout out to Kevin for doing that first. Kevin, I never pronounce his last name right, so I'm not even going to try, but he did that first, and I'd love to come up and do that.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We're so happy to have you. And you join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.
Woo! Thank you so much. Yeah. We'll fade out.